Thank you.
My meetings are, my wrestling practice is right.
You're ready. I'll
So I
just
should be good.
admit you to the room and then make you an administrator. And then you can share.
Wi-Fi.
So it's right up there.
Look at that. We got peeps in the other place now.
Say it again?
We got people on the thing.
No, he's gonna become one in just a second. And then he can share his computer. And we'll be able to see it up there. And it'll be all fancy like 21st century stuff.
Yeah. I think. Heck. What was the plans you sent out? Was that for
That's the 1063 street project, the Piper property.
Piper property? Okay, that's how I.
Well, there's two things I sent. So the one that I sent today,
How do I find
I
these?
sent some today and then I sent something last week.
Subdivision.
I can invite you.
That's the one I saw.
Yeah, the one last week.
Invite me if I could.
I bet you I can, invite,
Okay, yeah.
Printed that before looking how many.
and then.
Yeah, I
Eight papers, and I had like all these different designs, so I was like, oops.
Oh, so that's the one that shows it all and the other ones break it down, because the other ones look small, like, it almost looked
Yeah, it
like.
was straight, straight.
Yeah, I should have cut it off back to the first page, but I was like, wow.
But there was one that had it off.
Yeah.
So it wasn't bad.
The first page did, okay. It makes sense of the size of the shape of the property.
Yeah, that's us.
Hey, Chris, yeah, I have a seat over there.
He's working with this.
It's cool.
Yes, okay.
I don't know if there's a defined default or not.
I did bring my computer and I downloaded that on it, so I could like open it up and show all of it if we need to.
It hasn't been set up, then.
I don't think.
Yeah, it might not. I don't, oh, no, it's asking for a password.
911.
All right,
Try to put that in.
so-
That's the password usually.
I kid was trying to put that password in
Yeah, maybe you guys can.
They're gonna stack them like this on you, man. I would not do that. Yeah. Put the phone down.
Not a good idea.
Yeah. Grab and order a pizza.
Invite, copy the invite to the clipboard. And
I think you're
then,
facing mine, right?
if it's not too complicated, then.
I can't see that far anyway. Like it.
Turn out for wrestling? I was
Yes.
gonna say, I went on the town website.
Plus another 8.
Yeah, there is kind of a standing link.
So,
On the
yeah, more than I've had in a long time. And we're doing it without a wrestling mat.
That's right.
Yeah, Emmett told me this. It's like, hey, it'll be really tough, man. Just get slammed on the gym floor.
That holds
You
the
don't
mats on the
think, I
ceiling
think
in
it's
the
a
middle.
static.
And the lift is broken.
Go for a
Well,
select-
no, the keypad is broken.
Yeah, I try that. And then
Yeah.
pretend like you're going to a selectmen's meeting, because I think
Down.
that
It's all the same.
it's all the
Two
same.
basketball nets on Saturday. And then after that, they were locked out permanently. They couldn't do anything.
Okay, then my client's in the clear.
Now it was, yeah. It was a kid that put him down, but
You know what? Come on, you guys invited me.
Oh, I did, didn't I? It would be the same thing. Pretty sure it'd be the same thing.
this summer, I was wondering if it was going.
You gotta
But yeah, it seems to be like all the buttons are working.
all right, let me go back to the meeting.
But you know, work in orders with the person. So rough. 18 kids in a mat.
We
I'm
were so
like,
lucky in our high school because we had a sign room. It's rolled out perfectly.
we get them, but- I borrow bills today, but.
So.
Turkey.
Also, for pies. All right, I'll make some pies then. Might get them to you maybe early, not in the morning.
Get the fishing game.
After 8. Okay.
I'm mine.
Yeah, I can. drop
That doesn't
them right
work.
now. Yeah, I'll right over there or something. Okay.
Let me in that game password.
Goes to a community supper.
Fine.
Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
All right, it's good.
One moment, folks.
Anyone. Just need to call and let us know that you're gonna be there.
Is that a,
Like a community supper. It's Sunday morning.
that's Sunday, you said?
Sunday.
I think we do our town.
Maybe. Maybe.
Did you get a?
I get nothing.
Other media product.
Because they set off my earlier today.
That's nice. I can spin it around.
It's a recurring meeting, but we have another meeting in progress. Why can't you,
Is there an HDMI port on your laptop?
I could connect in, but
but then we would not have recording of it, which is kind of what we're shooting for. In the, you know. All right, let me just try something here. What if I go to Gmail?
I guess you can log into your own Gmail.
Yeah. And then,
send me.
and then send you a link.
Yeah, use the binder.
I guess we could take this time, like. Couple new faces.
Yeah, so
I haven't talked to before.
we could go around and do it.
Yeah.
Introduction.
Yeah, and this is.
So we have a new member, so, yeah, and we sort of formally introduced it, we have somebody, from the community too. Yeah, so, Chuck Cohen and, chair. Maybe,
Chad Wright, committee member as well as involved with the snowmobile club in town.
David Cody, committee member, and then Tom Biker.
Garrett Peterson's, secretary on the committee for now.
Everyone here's my nickname's Lenny. I just joined because, yeah, I run around here and I'd like to start using the trails as well.
Sean Schultz, any person, science teacher. Stuff.
Chris Bryant, I'm the vice chair and, cross country skier.
Nice.
And Kent the backwards over there. He's on
Ken? I'm Ken.
So select. Select.
We saw your picture in the mail, man. You're good.
You heard that?
And there's one other great person who's not here, Catherine Ludwig. So, but you're not the only woman on the committee.
I saw that you
She has
know.
a stable down there.
Okay.
So she does work.
I run by that.
She couldn't make it. Then Steve is our
Steve Kasanchik.
our consultant.
Yeah, so, I don't know if you guys have other business.
Yeah, and then introduce.
Chris Cool.
Chris.
We own 1063 Main down there. Part of the.
Nice, awesome.
The project.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Chris, do you wanna? I thought maybe, you know, if he doesn't wanna stay for the whole. Your shebang, we could have him go and
I understand.
Did you get the email I sent?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, yes.
If I can get on it, well, I can open it right here, we can look at it.
Yeah, because I'm not very good with that. Usually if my son's not around, I can't send an email.
Start driving some bonds. I mean, I just got the plan, so all I've done so far is pull it in, just so people can see what it looks like, maybe. I'm driving backwards, that is roughly the snowmobile trail. And then kind of see, there's the snowmobile trail, right? There are two snowmobile trails, I guess. That come
Yes.
together right there in the middle of that property.
Yep.
Um,
That was the fairly recent reroute, right? We
Yeah,
used to go,
this is whatever map you gave me.
Okay.
I literally took a picture of the map and
yeah, so we ended up
overlaid it
moving
as
one of
best
the,
as I can.
we moved one of the trails last year, so the one that kind of goes out through. This section here is no longer on Chris's property.
Okay,
We actually
cool.
have gone and crossed over in this area. And we had rerouted last year, a little bit, so, but yeah, basically we just go straight through,
Right.
his property now. Yeah, we basically just kind of come through.
Instead of an
here now, and
intersection,
then
it's
the
just
other
one line
piece
going through now.
goes out.
Yeah, but you're saying there's one line going through now?
So
Yeah.
it's just this east-westish
Yes, exactly.
line. And so that's the only one you'd be interested in.
That's the only one that we have. The other one, we basically cross Academy a little bit further down. Ideally, I mean, if it's something that, if Chris wants us to kind of border the backside, that's always something we're open to, if that's.
Like I said, this year is no issue at all. We don't have to change anything.
Yeah.
And once all the clearing is pretty much, when the smoke settles and the clearing's done and the boundaries are established, I could just end up having to go around.
Yeah.
Go around the outside.
Maybe just take a step back, maybe just. Maybe you just want to give like a little sort of overview of the project, what's gonna be there and sort of.
Oh, sure. Yep. So we intend on doing a 63 house subdivision in there. Community center up at the top left corner, probably where the sled trail sort of comes in.
Yeah, I was
from
gonna
that
say, it's
side.
actually a really good location.
Yeah, I know that. But I mean, there's a few, you can see where the houses come around the other side, so I mean, I guess all I'm concerned about is just being too intrusive for some homeowners, but I mean, if we keep it to the outside, I don't really see an issue. The only thing it's gonna do is just push it down the road a few yards, so you either have to cross and or cut an angle across or whatnot.
Yeah.
So I'm a pretty avid snowmobiler, so I don't wanna see any trails go away at all.
So, I think what, might have talked a little bit about it at the meeting, the planning board meeting, about sort of what we're looking at, what Steve's been looking at in terms of the trail behind the high school. And then ultimately, we're looking at maybe trying to tie into something that'll get us out, the Main Street. And this seems like it might, be a fit. There's some, intermediate properties that we would have to sort of negotiate with.
Yep.
Like established year-round walking trails,
So,
separate from the snow.
so people
trail,
like
maybe the
multi-use
same.
and, yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say basically the snowmobile trail as is, since we kind of talked about upgrading them behind the school. This isn't very far from that, so graveling some of that to make it better for year-round use and tying it into the community building.
Right. So we're not sure about how what's gonna work with the HOA and they kind of set their own government to some extent, gonna kind of leave it up to them to see if they wanna turn the community center into a community center where they maybe rent it for functions. I don't know. I'm just throwing ideas. This is pretty much in its infancy.
Yeah.
So we're looking for feedback from everybody too, different ideas and whatnot. Kind of like make everybody a little happy out of this whole thing.
I imagine hooking this up to is it a 65 or older community or what?
55.
55 or older community, so. Minimum those to be 65. At 55 and older, they would want access to property trails that are gravelled and accessible, like accessible trails like we're talking about putting
Yeah,
in.
right.
So that's
So,
really
yeah,
cool.
The trail behind the high school would be an accessible trail, same thing with the hard gravel that, could be
Walking
used.
paths up and down.
Yeah,
whatnot.
so, it's not big,
Safe.
no big roots, no big boulders and things like that, so.
Changed since I was a kid. I don't like walking up and down the roads anymore.
Yeah.
Many people on phones not paying attention.
Right, right.
That was one of the big things in my family. I've got 3 young children and we always either go to Augusta and do the rail trail or go to Lisbon and do the trails out there just because same thing. We'd rather not have them biking on the roads and stuff, but quick question with regards to the trail location, Steve. I mean, right now, the snowmobile trail, because it's only seasonal and the land is all vacant, we've never really looked at relocating it.
Yep.
If it were to be something that were more of like a public access or hopefully permanent, where we were to look for a potential easement or something like that even, would it be worth like moving it to like right along property lines, on the back of properties in both cases? And kind of going that route so that we could potentially do something as a town for an easement to permanently potentially look at trails there.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably where people are more likely to want to give an easement on their property, and it's like
Right.
towards the back.
I'm just thinking for longevity, if it's something we want to look at as a trail system that's there into the
Yeah.
future, it just seems to make the most sense, especially even from Chris's perspective. I mean, you would want to potentially have that as a long-term thing. And I think in terms of funding, that's what we talked about too, right? Is our best option for funding would be potentially something that we know is gonna be
It's a lot
sustainable
easier
for
to
the
get more
future.
money for something that you know is gonna
Right.
last, yeah.
I think by rerouting to go around the outside of that property, I mean, it's quite all corners and whatnot, so that would keep speeds down too.
Yep.
Now, I know I used to be a hot dog with snowmobiles. If it was a wide open field, I had to see how fast I get across it. If you were running across on the outside edge, I mean, it's like the other trails that come off in Cognawaga and the signs all over saying, keep it quiet, use or lose it, and I'm sure it's pretty much, it'll be the same everywhere like that, but I think that would automatically keep the speeds down on the outside and it's actually gonna lengthen the trail too for people hiking and whatnot, so.
If there were some costs involved with, legal expenses for defining an easement. There is a limited amount of funding available through the TIF program that the town has. And I'm pretty sure there's a willingness from the select board. We'd need to see something, hard and fast.
Mhm.
But if there were some legal expenses, overhead type stuff where someone's got to spend a couple $1,000s to get an easement defined on a deed, I'm pretty sure the town could come up with a funding source to make that happen.
Chris, do you have any plans to have any kind of trails inside that property? Or just like if people wanted to walk, would they just be walking on the roads? or-
Yeah, we did pretty much so far. The lots are, I mean, they're not huge, like 15,000 square foot lots. There is like open spots, mostly on the perimeter. I mean, it would be nice to be able to just make a whole walking path around it. A pretty good size, like 33 acres, so I mean, make a path all the way around that thing would be pretty nice. Good exercise there.
That also would kind of be a unique thing I'm just thinking out of the box here, but, most of these, higher density, single family home developments have sidewalks and it's a driveway and a sidewalk and before you know it, you see Florida. And to have something, that's pretty much how they do.
I was gonna ask, that was my next question, yeah.
Yeah, but to have something that would be, around the outside perimeter that gives folks a chance to sort of walk away from the road, and that would connect to a public, system, would be intriguing.
Sure. Yeah, if you guys can hand up anything, set up, we can bring it to my two partners too and to the planning board also, and like I said, more input the better. I mean, it's really not something I sit around and think about much, so.
Right.
Yeah, the input from you guys gives me some ideas too.
Well, and it becomes, if it becomes a more, a permanent thing, that would not that would be sort of an easement, before even the HOA takes over, for example, right? Then it also becomes something that the town could apply for grants to help offset the materials cost or
Right, or
installation.
maintenance or whatnot, yeah. I mean, if the HOA didn't have to maintain it, I feel like it was a burden to them, might not be a big deal too.
Sure, and if it's, before the HOA even exists, then it becomes something that's
May not be
just,
a bad idea.
fait accompli.
To try to get it before it gets turned over, so it's sort of baked.
I don't know what 63 people could come.
That's
up
right.
with.
Yeah,
I mean,
because then it
that's,
becomes like,
that's-
oh, man,
that's
one
what you
person
get.
Yeah.
wants to be the stick in the mud.
I think it's a good addition to the whole project, but it would be good to have it sort of baked in, I think.
Sure.
In terms of your timeline now, you've got, I know you got a site visit coming
Yeah,
up.
14th of December, I believe. Then, as soon as we get the green light there, we're gonna put a DB permit in, which takes 6 months, which puts us in the spring.
Okay.
We're really hoping to get going in the spring.
Okay.
We do have one house down in the corner. We subdivided one lot off from, so it'll be the model home or first home or whatnot. But after, that's the only one we can do until next spring. Pretty much stopped after that. We got plenty of time to think of different ideas and whatnot.
As in 26 or 25?
Excuse me,
26 or 25?
25.
Oh, okay. Oh, so next, that's not too far.
Yeah, not too bad. Not soon enough for us, but.
Yeah.
That's gonna take you a couple of years from that.
Yeah, I would think 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's still pretty ambitious, 21 places a year.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's everything going right. Maybe get some good weather for a few years, that'd be nice too.
Pretty dry in there.
Mhm. It is a try.
So if we wanted to send you thoughts, how would we do that?
You still have my email right there?
Yeah, so I consider,
All right.
and I think, you know, we'll sort of stay plugged into the planning board process.
Sure.
And I know there's gonna be a public hearing coming up as part of that, and we'll attend.
Good.
You know, and I think just keeping the dialogue up and trying to, you know, exchange ideas and then sort of, you know, what we sort of incorporate in terms of what gets approved, I think that would be sort of the goal.
Good deal.
Yeah, I can do up some maps to just show what we've talked about.
Sure. Does like anything I can bring to my partners too. Everybody do some brainstorming and whatnot.
Gonna have
Yeah.
golf cart parking.
55 plus, everybody probably have one.
Oh,
That's Florida for you, right?
Yeah, well, and then we can bring up the whole
That's
using it. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is actually one of the topics that we've sort of visioned for a potential future is the idea of using public ways as a means, allowing the use of golf carts on public ways.
Yep.
Limited in some way.
Right,
And we've got, if Catherine's not here at this meeting, we might want to wait until we have a chance to have our survey expert do, you know, the analysis of the survey that we just put out. But we did survey folks at the November election to sort of get a, you know, read the pulse of to what degree people are interested in this and whether it's a, you know, something that folks would be worth, think would be worth exploring.
a lot of northern towns allow side by sides.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Well, and there, I mean, for residents of that location, the development you're thinking of, to get to the Monmouth General is probably not realistic on a, you know, walking, but perhaps on a golf cart.
Right. Especially if you went up through Academy and went down through there, it's lost,
Yeah.
instead of staying off Main Street.
Not a golf cart on Main Street.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they even let golf carts down to Saco in certain areas too, so
Oh.
Sure.
some of the campgrounds around, like.
Yeah.
I don't like having a golf cart down there, but they do, it's kind of,
Yeah, so maybe not in the 45 zone, but in the 25 zone would be realistic.
And, you know, I mean, one sort of thing in my mind is somewhat of, let's see, you know, if we get this sort of access onto Main Street, 132, that also connects to Academy and things like that. I think there's a better pitch to be made to the DOT to get something on 132 in terms of a bike pedestrian lane. I think they're much more sort of receptive to something like that when it's part of a network. So I think we'd have a pretty decent pitch then, you know, if we had something like this to go to the TOT. And then again, that would benefit those people in terms of if they wanted to walk into town, you know, there'd be a.
I know we're gonna leave two right of ways to two different, two exits off the land, going to someone else, two other owners' properties.
Oh.
We may be able to approach them at some point, you could connect off that, and make another side trail to Academy or something, I don't know. Different opportunities down the road.
Yeah, I know I've talked with a few landowners, one that butts right up to you, you know, Candace, right, just about the potential option of doing something, which right now goes to the middle of their property and it would really only just touch a very corner there. I think the other one would be Guy Piper, which is who you bought your property off of. And he owns a piece, that we would basically be skirting along the back of.
Okay.
I think the only thing that we find on the back pieces of those properties, some of it's fairly wet. So that would be one of the things maybe we could work with Steve on, just to figure out what would be the best opportunity on those back borders. Because it is fairly wet in some of the area, and we have to work through that from a trail building perspective, I guess, but.
Oh, I like that. That is one thing about forcing a trail to like a property line is that
Right.
you can't avoid anything in the way.
Right.
So it's definitely something to think about. I think there were some wetland, I mean, there's wetlands there and then there's some on your map, so between here and there, there probably are.
So some of the stuff they call the wetlands on ours, it just, there's nothing there.
Yeah.
Just certain type of soil rules on the dime. they just go
AV
over that.
9 XW.
Good, good. So, you stick around, you could go, Chris. but-
So I almost fell asleep on the couch before I got here.
I figured if you want to get going, then you can. So thank you for coming.
Thanks for coming, Rich. Nice meeting you.
It's not like. Sorry, folks.
Okay, well, we could, wow, Steve's still
Yes.
still around, we could do the minutes, so. Last time, any edits or suggestions?
It's all right to me.
Last time soon.
Motion to.
I move we approve the minutes.
Yeah.
And second,
Appreciate it.
I'll second.
okay, all in favor?
93.
Okay, great.
KU. XW.
All right.
Be a lot nicer if I could pull up, but we can all stare at my screen too.
Is 355-034. So sorry.
Yeah. Well.
Oh, wait. Here it is. You need to scroll down.
Oh, look at that.
Look at that.
Hold on.
One moment, please. One more time.
Oh, yeah, real big.
Can you read me that?
987.
You're already.
1725 5854. And then the passcode is 355034.
Oh.
Oh, man.
Myself.
Look at that. I think I'll let this guy in. Should I let him in?
Oh,
He's already in.
how's that? There we go. No weird feedback. You can let me share.
Already that. Share.
You don't need to see my video.
Here.
I can send request here.
Here we go. Allow. Look at that.
Boom, boom. Look at that. Look at that. Technology works.
Bam.
Right.
All right, let me get rid of this. Where's that?
I remember walking that.
Right behind the school. Build that.
Yeah. Hard. In the middle of the state. Yeah, I've got like maybe 15 slides that basically talk about what I've done to date, which is spend a little bit of time with some folks here and by myself behind the school at the tree farm and looking at GIS data. And so with a hard focus really on behind the school and getting enough detail to go after funding, grant funding for that. We'll talk about that's no longer going to be RTP funding. That's going to be main trails program funding, but it's essentially going to be the same application, just less of a match, which is nice.
In a higher cap.
In a higher cap, yeah. So lots of nice things with that. And then I can also pull up GIS and we can talk more about, like, we can look at maybe that subdivision or the other properties and just everything. So I'll try to be quick, too, I promise. Anyway, what have I done? We've done some field work, right? Walked around in the woods. That's what we did. What does that generate? Bunch of data points. So what are the findings basically from the time we spent in the woods and the data we have? And hopefully, yeah, it's a little far away, but the magenta outlines, those are the school properties. That like cyan dash line, that's the snowmobile trail. The cyan outline to the lower left, that's the fairgrounds. You've got Cat's Prod, and then maybe you can see, I've got a cursor, right? Can I move the cursor?
You can use this too.
There we go. I have to remember which one to use so
Okay,
these brown lines are sort of the existing mode pathways, right? And then Cat's Trail. And so really wet over there.
right there. That big circle.
Pretty much that whole area. And wetness extends beyond the property.
Just one spot that's dry in there.
Like some pretty significant sort of like drainage moving down that,
Yeah, it's all coming onto schools.
yeah.
Here we go.
That doesn't go there anymore.
What doesn't go there anymore?
That red circle at the bottom,
Yeah,
snowmobile trail no longer connects down to the quick stop there. And then the trails on Cat's property are what we would describe, they have a fall line alignment, so they go straight down the hill. Even though the hill is very mellow, it's about a 5 or 6% grade, which is 5% is the grade you would want for what's considered a universally accessible trail. But still, it's difficult to make fall line stuff drain forever, especially if you're gonna add stone on top, so. Just something to note, like we would probably think about moving some stuff around, if we wanted to incorporate those trails, but. I've got some other thoughts and, well, this is why we're here, we're gonna talk about everything, so. Those thoughts, recommendations.
can you put the cursor on the area that we were just talking with the developer about? What was his name?
Oh, it's up here. It's way
Okay.
up here. Chris, not way
Chris.
up, but it's off here.
Okay,
So recommendations. This loop around the field is pretty darn dry and pretty approachable. And to me is like a big green light for an initial demonstration type project to go after funding for.
With the understanding they're doing field work and changing that.
They're installing some drainage, right? Is that what we talked about? That's what he was doing.
You had
Yeah.
the, you had the RSU guy there.
Yeah,
Okay,
I don't think, none of where we really looked at was gonna be affected.
okay, okay.
And then this area is basically really nice for the rest of the accessible bike trails. Go back here.
The trail that's, so the left sort of fork area.
Yeah, like above the snowmobile trail, basically,
Yeah.
above the snowmobile trail. And so here's essentially, you can see this gray line, right? Hopefully. The screen's kind of far away, so I apologize and maybe pick the best colors for looking at it from across the room. But really, one thought I had is it's sometimes it's difficult to have a trail system that crosses from school property from public property onto private property for the sake of all the investment you're gonna be making, which I'll show you in a sec, would be fairly significant to create universally accessible trails back here. And just for like that amount of investment balanced with the maintenance and stewardship that would have to go behind that. I think it makes a lot of sense to maybe keep all the trails on all the really significantly the universally accessible, the all persons trails on school property, essentially. I'm not sure, this is another very steep section right here.
at the top.
Yeah, and so it didn't feel like that connectivity was any different than connecting down to the parking lot or the parking lot, then that was just straight here, connecting right into there. If that seems like it's really important to folks in the town, we can talk about that more, but it would be difficult to get a universally accessible trail over there. The drainage is also kind of funky with everything that happened with the field.
So where's the connection that you're saying? Where does that go?
Right.
That
Is that the corner of the parking
Middle
lot that we
school or
talked
the
about?
parking lot?
middle school baseball field,
The
yeah,
middle school.
yeah, right,
Yeah.
where the outhouse was.
And so you still have connectivity into Catch Trails. You could still do a trail there.
Right.
I just,
It just wouldn't be universal.
I wouldn't.
Well,
Because of the grade.
There's a hole in the rock wall and just some brush to be cut and you can connect that straight.
Yeah, right here is actually a really nice place to connect
Yeah.
Cass
yeah.
property.
Yep.
Used to be.
Is it?
Showing, sharing the snowmobile trail here.
Mhm.
And then basically where that really wet drainage is, splitting there. Still doing a reroute like we talked about.
For
Where that,
snowmobile.
where that dog bone is, that's what this short little line is.
Yeah.
Snowmobile reroute, and then having the accessible trail kind of peel off into the woods that's where my tape measure was probably found.
Yeah, we were up there. Yeah.
Get back yet?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
That was funny. The kid had found his phone. He's like, I could keep it. I'm like, I'm sure I'll figure it.
And then you've got that connection and coming back down.
What's the reroute for you, you mentioned? Straightening out that corner?
It gets really wet down there in that corner and it's a little bit drier up high.
Okay. Okay, and then from your arrow,
And of course-
your pointer down towards the high school baseball field is really wet in there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I wouldn't really go in there.
You won't go.
well, no, I mean, that actual, that trail,
This
right
trail?
there, yeah,
Yeah.
right there is
Yep.
That's doable.
almost always that.
Yeah, both of them were.
Both of
Honestly,
those
the one in the
things are
field
pretty
seemed
wet.
worse. The one in
Yeah.
the woods I thought looked better when we walked it, drier.
It's, yeah, dry year. Dry year, right?
Yeah. So you definitely can't read that, but that says 0.4 miles for that field loop.
Okay.
It says 0.9 miles for that other loop.
So the field loop, you're showing it going down into the woods back there?
Yes.
Off the field?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can open, the PowerPoints are sometimes useful, but also like it's way more fun to open GIS and be able to zoom in, so
So the field loop is 0.4
0.4,
and then going out to the middle school is how far?
0.9.
So it'd be like 1.3 total.
Yep,
That's not bad.
it's like 250 feet is that reroute for the snowmobile trail, so it's not huge.
That's not bad.
It's not bad at all. And I also think it is probably feasible to also do some sort of, you could make it all persons. The grades and the trains seem to work over at the fairgrounds. Or you could do something less developed if you so chose, and that would be like another like almost 0.4 miles, 0.35.
Is to circumnavigate the fairgrounds.
Yeah, so that,
What, how did we end up with the question of whether the deed of the fairgrounds would allow us to be able to, you know, the trustees of the Compton, whatever.
I think if we put a trail on there, it would be just with an agreement. We couldn't get an easement from the trustee and then sort of.
They're
Bound
limited,
up
the
in that.
trustees are limited by the deed,
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
but we could get an agreement
I think we could, yeah.
and then
As
there
long
would
as
be
it's-
no,
Probably as long as it's not a long term, you know, maybe a 5 or 10 year agreement, but not a 100-year agreement. I don't think we can get anything like that.
okay, and then we're not limited if we're looking for grant opportunities, go on private.
Yep, RTP is, there's no, or no, it's not RTP, the main trails program, there's not gonna be any strict number, like you need to have public access for this many years. The more the better, essentially.
Sure.
You know, if it was very tenuous and it was like, we got a year lease, they might not fund it, but.
That question's on the application.
Yeah, it's basically, what do you have?
If it's a 5 to 10 year agreement and potential for an extension,
Yeah, that looks much better, yeah.
okay.
Some of the other federal money I know was for like 10 or 20 years.
Fairground's not going anywhere though.
If you ever use, and well, that's not
That's
town, right? That's
Well-
trustees.
It's a nonprofit.
Because LWCF would have to be spent by the town on town land. That you could certainly not go back on.
Right. Well, the way I see it, we're being recorded here, right? So how would I say this?
Just right.
With a 5 to 10 year agreement, there would be a significant constituency at the 10-year mark that would say, I really like this.
Yeah. That's usually the approach.
To be revisited and.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think I mean, I'd be curious maybe to know more about how that fair goes down and how those fields are used, but my hunch is that a perimeter trail such as shown here, connecting directly from the school, you kind of go up, you get on that side hill, you come down the field. Then I think the best course of action might be kind of tucking behind the big long barn, popping out near where Public Works parks their trucks right now.
There might be some political issues there.
Public Works
It's just- it gets even busier down here with the.
Well, right.
We don't wanna go
gravel
back.
and stuff
Oh,
like
true.
that.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
and then this is essentially a road that kind of,
Steve, what's the grade going up Academy Road on the fairgrounds? Cause I walked it the other day, it's like, that's sort of. It's a little.
well, when we get a GIS, we can measure that. I didn't have a section of trail here. I had it connecting around.
Right, because there's a
Because
sidewalk
there's a sidewalk there, yeah.
on the,
You could go
no,
potentially
I see, I
on
see
that
what you're
inside.
There's a
of it.
there's a sidewalk
I see
on
what you're
the
saying, I see what you're saying, yeah, okay.
But that is.
That's where all the
west side.
Winnebago's park.
Speaking of, it's wet there, so you definitely probably can't see everything here, but you'll be given a map that you can submit with the applications and of course, a map to review when you get to deliverables in hand, and then this level of detail for the application, which calls out a bunch of places that basically calls out significant units for building the trail. So significant earthen ramps, like you need one to get from high on the high ground across that swale. You'll also need a culvert there because you're gonna end up crossing that swale and filling it. Then you need a ramp to get off of the high ground the fields are on down to the forest essentially. So that's gonna be a significant amount of material versus just like the material for the tread. Another kind of significant drainage there, so recommending a culvert. There's also a bunch of uphill ditching recommendations and turnpiking essentially, turnpiking is a raised tread. So all of this being planned and designed as an all persons trail would require material fill. So it wouldn't be built with whatever the native earth is where other trails might be. This would all require buying aggregate, bringing that aggregate in, digging the trail down, putting that aggregate in. So that becomes the tread. So that's firm, stable. Some of these areas are probably going to need turnpiking where they're literally going to be needed to be lifted up. So there's going to be even more aggregate needed because the trail needs to be 6 inches above the ground because the ground puddle, or 8 or 9 inches above the ground because the ground's puddling in the springtime. And even if you had like very firm surface, no one would be using the trail because it'd all be covered in water.
As you can see by the tractor treads. The
So,
spot that's on the hill, that's where you have the drainage that was put in for the middle school fields. That like berm that you walk across, someone mowed it.
Chad Martin.
Yeah, that's awesome.
up here, I
Using it in
think,
every class,
right?
but so it's not super wide
yeah.
and I think it's intended for the trail. Would it
Yeah,
have
I
to be-
bush hogged it before we went out that day, just in
Yeah.
case we wanted to walk across the retention.
We didn't walk.
We didn't, no, but it's
Oh,
basically
okay.
just one tractor's wide.
Yeah.
it drops off on both
Little
sides.
tractor, yeah. Well, that's what I was wondering if that was part of the plan. If it was part of the plan, I was wondering if it, what, like, how would you widen it when it drops off on both sides, that kind of thing?
Yeah, we didn't look at that and
Okay.
I tend to kind of get scared of the stormwater management areas.
Okay.
We would probably want to talk to whoever designed all that stuff.
Why do you get scared of them?
If they're retention ponds, they probably don't want people anywhere near them, most likely, if there's any sort of water ponding. You know,
Yeah, not, one of them's got water sometimes.
Yeah.
The other, rest of it's always
I
dry.
mean, like a drowning hazard?
yeah. Usually you see them chain link fenced off.
Really?
Mm.
Yeah, like in subdivisions, they always have their ponds.
That's kind of crazy. I
If they're-
mean,
if
we
they're
live,
too
we
deep.
live in the lakes region.
Yeah, wow.
Everyone at the high school chained out.
Yep.
But
And that was never.
never held water.
It had water.
The lake is
That was
natural,
intentional.
that is a hole someone dug.
They cleaned it out, did you see that?
Okay, so they get some
Last
liability.
week, I don't know. I didn't-
An attractive nuisance? I don't know.
If it's wide enough, if it's, so that the all-persons trail, you're gonna want to be, this has all been spec'd at 5 feet wide.
Okay.
And so if that berm top is 5 feet wide, you know.
No.
No,
2.5 maybe?
Yeah,
Maybe
so
two.
maybe it becomes one of those side trails, which we
Yeah.
could definitely include in this plan.
Okay.
Uh,
It's got a.
more like a footpath.
Yeah, the problem is it's got a steep exit. Straight uphill to the parking lot. It's a pretty steep exit.
For all bounce. Probably gonna need a boardwalk structure to cross that wet stuff, and that's where the snowmobile trail would split from the all-persons trail. You essentially, the boardwalk would be designed and built for human traffic. And then you would send the snowmobiles right, put in a new culvert to cross, get on that reroute, and then get back on the dry stuff. Also called out a couple other places to put in culverts on the snowmobile trail to try to get that to dry out. Because here it would all be hardened and new all-persons. And so far, in this detailed design, right, we haven't gone any further. The discussions we were just having at the beginning of the meeting, the larger report will say, yeah, you should consider extending that all-persons accessible trail to 1063, to 1063, which would also benefit the snowmobile trail by creating a much firmer, drier surface that would hold snow better and longer in the season.
Are those two trails the same specs when you build them? Universal accessible trail, all persons trail?
Yeah, they're the
All
same
person
thing.
trail would be the same as a snowmobile trail in the winter? Or you have
It
to
would
build
be a really, well, they might want it a little wider. You
Probably.
probably want the corridor a little wider.
But how would does that get damaged at all by snowmobiles? I wouldn't think so.
No,
And you guys wouldn't care if it was built up bigger and stronger?
no, they would probably appreciate it,
Yeah.
knowing that it was dry and firm
Yeah.
and had culverts.
Service will last a little bit longer.
Yeah, it typically means that they can be grooming longer and later into the season because the snow will hold better.
Maybe sooner. It's a little wet there in the beginning of the season.
One issue I just thought of in terms of like going up into the middle school. The parking, that was one concern that was sort of expressed when we went to the RSU2 meeting. So I think, one of the benefits of going higher onto like Cat's property was having that parking area. There.
You could probably still have a parking area and trail connectivity. I would not advertise it as your accessible parking.
The parking in the school parking lot is good as long as it's not during school hours,
Yeah,
And
and
are
would
we
you want
really
people, would
unless you parked in the ball field during the school hours.
you want people
high school.
using the trail during the school hours?
The intention is for fully accessible, so to people that aren't working would
Yeah,
want
it's
to
like
use
all
it.
day. I mean,
Yeah.
like,
But you're right, it's a conversation to be had.
Yeah, one thing to bear in mind so if you call something, trails have very little specifications to them or standards, right? Very little. It's not like building a road per se. But as soon as you start talking about universally accessible and all persons trails,
that is a legal thing as defined by the architectural building, the ABA, I forget what it stands for. It is not ADA. The ABA basically governs accessibility in outdoor spaces. And one of the things that happens is as soon as you start having universally accessible trails, all trails connected to that universally accessible trail must also be universally accessible unless they meet one of the exemptions. So if we were to have accessible parking on Kat's property, you would need to have universally accessible trails on her property connecting over to the school property. Which would mean bringing in material, building the trail up, all those things. So if you didn't, if she called her trails equestrian trails, that they were designed and built for equestrians, that's an exemption. If it's designed and built for pedestrians, then if the primary use is pedestrians, then it needs to be accessible. The primary use was mountain biking or the primary use was snowmobiling, then you could still connect into an accessible trail. But if you have the accessible parking over there, you definitely need the accessible connection, which could be the sidewalk. That's what I was considering was like, could you use the sidewalk down and then come into the middle school parking lot and then head over?
Yeah.
What other exemptions are there?
Basically, if the terrain is impractical to build accessible, and this terrain is very flat and easy to build
So
accessible.
no
so,
excuses in
yeah,
this
not-
particular
that's
case,
not-
yeah.
The biggest, I would have to look up the other exemptions.
So, if there's a concern about parking, for trail users, could we figure out another place for trail users to park?
Here,
Anywhere on the sidewalk, right? I mean, if the sidewalk is,
Yeah, I mean, here they could get across, well, as long as there's a crosswalk somewhere.
there.
we could make a crosswalk
Yeah.
or something.
I got some
There's
pictures.
a
Down the
crosswalk
road.
by the
One,
school, I think.
Yeah.
yeah, there's one outside.
Yep.
While we're talking about accessibility and literally access, it's very hard to, I keep using that, very hard to see down in here.
Yeah.
But that field loop would come out, where that new ditch is being, or that ditch is being improved at the bottom of that driveway. Up behind, whatever dugout that is.
Yeah, softball.
Yeah. Over here, not over here. And you can't send the folks, you can't have the accessibility back to the car, be straight up that parking lot. You know, if they entered the trail at the corner here and they came all the way around, while they might just go straight up the parking lot, we'll need to provide them a better route. And so the trail will actually have to come up to the parking lot, go around the edge of the parking lot, pop in on the snowmobile trail, and then there'll be a new connector that connects up to this other leg right there. So that's the sort of thought and investment that's gonna have to be put into an accessible trail. It's a great idea. I think it's a wonderful place to do it. I think it's totally feasible. I've got some rough costs here we can look at in a sec. I think it's literally the next slide. I think it's a good ask from the main trails program. Cool. Being totally honest, it is gonna be some work and there's like a lot to think about, especially when we bring in the accessibility standpoint. That was part of the reason I kind of shied away from Kat's property too, is like, we start calling all her stuff accessible and now we've got to build all that stuff up. I still think, you know, let's leave the trails. They're great. Maybe call them equestrian only, maybe have that as the during school parking and, you know, people could use the sidewalk, or this could be during school parking and they can use the sidewalk to get over to the trails.
Right, that's an important, I think that's an important feature to just sort of answer the concerns of the RSU.
Right,
Yeah.
So kind of nullify their,
they could park here
Well,
and,
They could park right by the tennis courts.
Yeah.
All right.
and they, yeah.
or couldn't they park down at the, what about down? I mean, they could park down on the field.
Yeah, so here is
If-
right here,
As long as there's no events.
If it's open,
down here.
it's just not open in the winter time.
They don't plow that in the winter.
gates closed, going down to the parking lot in the winter.
Gotta watch out for sleds.
Yeah,
going down there. Kids are going down there pretty fast when we have snow.
Really? No.
Oh,
Oh,
So if you park, if you park at this building, that gives you fairground access directly
We can,
and you can use the.
I can open GIS right now if we want to look at maps more in depth, or I can talk about costs real quick and talk about the tree farm, and then we can open GIS and look at everything.
I'm kind of curious about the cost.
Yeah, keep it all. All with your stuff.
I can pull out all the ideas I want.
Yeah.
You can't see them, right? Yeah, so I can tell
Yeah,
you.
it's fine print costs.
So that field loop, looking at like 50,000, I've got 52,000 in there, and then I threw a 20% contingency. You'd probably want to budget at least a 10% contingency. I'll crunch these numbers a little harder as I get you the hard deliverable on the draft here soon. But that is essentially what I expected for like a all persons type trail in, not the easiest terrain, not the hardest terrain in the world, but certainly not the easiest. I mean, to give you some scale on what these things can cost. We built a similar trail in Patton, Maine, not as wet terrain. And it was essentially the same cost per foot here, almost $100,000 a mile with bringing in material, which is what this works out to. That 0.4 miles, almost a half mile of that field loop, $50,000.
Why are we dipping down into the woods on that one?
I think it's prettier and it'd be a better trail experience.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does that add to the cost?
Substantial. Bulky.
It makes it a little longer. You'd still have to bring in all the material.
Yeah, there was like an earthen
There's the ramps that you'd have
ramp,
to.
right? I don't know
yeah.
if that adds to it much, but
It does add to it, but I wouldn't say it adds.
it's worth it. It's a better trail.
Yeah, I could pull out that,
Where's it going in the woods? Where's it going?
basically just
Dips
below
down
the
on the right
fields.
field line, right
Yeah.
field of the baseball field, goes into the
I think
woods
it'd be
there.
nice to get people on the.
Okay,
woods.
Be good
so
for me.
behind the dugout.
Below
Below
the
the-
soccer field kickboard thing. And where they dump leaves and all the grass clippings, right?
Right.
Which is like, if you put it along the edge of the field, we would have to talk to the grounds crew about, okay, now you have to find someplace else to dump all your debris, because now there's a trail here.
Right.
So, sorry, this lets them, well, if it goes in the woods, they can keep doing that and it wouldn't affect the trails.
Gotcha.
That woods loop, same thing. It actually came in a little higher because like that boardwalk could potentially be expensive. There's more turnpiking in that, raising the field loop. There's some ramps, there's some culverts, there's the tread material. There's not any turnpiking and ditching and that kind of, it's not as wet. And I forget the fellow's name we went out with from the maintenance. Randy. He said it got wet back there, and I believe him. I'm not calling Randy a liar. But I don't think it gets as wet. It didn't look like it gets as wet. You can see the ferns and the
Where?
grass.
Where are we?
Behind the high school fields, is that what they're called? Below the high school fields versus the existing snowmobile trail and where the trails are mowed below the middle school and all that area.
Right, like the old apple orchard where it hits the woods.
Yeah, I guess that's what it's called, right? The apple orchard.
That is, yeah. It is consistently wet in there. Where I'm thinking about anyway. I could show you.
We'll get the maps open.
Yep.
Snowmobile reroute. Again, putting in like some professional costs, you could probably get below this because that could be more of a volunteer effort, but a couple $1,000s to get that done. Cut some trees and add in some culverts in some of those places. Yeah. So certainly, could be a significant project.
What's
Fun.
So for the, I can't see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just there, I'm like, where am I looking over there? I can't see
So, yeah, okay, so.
Let me ask a question.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to know what the grand total was for everything that you were describing. I can't see.
Without the contingency, it was 192,000. With the contingency, a 20% contingency, which
Yeah.
is significant, 230,000.
Is that with the fairgrounds?
That does not include the fairgrounds.
Okay, that's just the
So 230,
school.
Yeah.
that's still, I mean, with the new
Yeah,
ceiling, that
Yeah.
we're still under the
and
ceiling.
I'm like,
What's the new ceiling?
250.
I
And
was
how
pretty,
often do they, how many how many 250 awards do they do?
well, they haven't done it yet, so, yeah.
It's gotta be a first.
Yeah.
It's unclear.
Yeah.
It's unclear, I mean, 250.
Only for the shovel-ready
It's,
project.
it's for our, it would be a first, that would be our first, you know.
Before the trails
How
box.
many bites of the apple we get,
Yeah.
but it would be a good first bite,
We
you
could
know.
al-
I
and
think
always
we could
do it
probably
that.
bring it in lower than that too. I need to probably make some calls to the local quarries and see what some of the stone actually is gonna cost.
Right.
But, you know, this is,
So, does anyone know if anyone's making this 3/4 minus locally?
yeah, I'm sure someone has what we need, yeah.
Like you maybe?
Or if someone else knows
Hmm.
that someone is.
I just ordered a.
Hey, yo.
Wasn't Noah.
If you,
Okay, that's where I got the brick.
Jamie?
Usually I go to, or it was St. Laurent, but it's Gendron now that bought out
Yeah,
St. Laurent.
Yeah, that's who I
That's
got
where I
it
usually
from.
get my 3/4 minus.
Yeah.
For around that.
Does it do any of the local, super local guy? I mean, like this.
I don't know that, I'm not
Frost
sure what,
make it?
I don't know if Frost does anything over off Cemetery Road
Mm.
themselves, but there are a few pits over there. I just don't know if any of them actually run.
Jimmy.
Yeah, Jimmy has his pit, but I don't know if I don't think he has equipment that he actually makes stuff with. There's Boobier over on 202 in Green. They have a crusher over there, so I'm not sure what they do for size.
that's the most significant cost with these all persons trails is the material.
3/4 miles.
So I told you about the trail in Penn. There's a trail we built that we're helping build in the Debsconite Lakes Wilderness, down the Golden Road, across A-Ball Bridge, down another dirt road on Nature Conservancy property.
Mm.
I think that project was like $350,000 for like maybe a mile of trail.
Wow.
And you know, that was going through lots of boulders, very difficult terrain, and then like bringing the material in. Especially when I first throw some numbers together and I'm being a little rough, so I'm gonna refine these. I'm hoping that they come down a little bit. The main trails program is gonna require a competitive bid.
Right.
Which is something to think about. I don't know if the town has any procurement rules themselves, but the BPL, Doug Beck, they're pretty accommodating for the most part. If you put stuff out to bid, and this, I'll essentially give you probably everything that you could just fit into
Into an RFP.
an RFP,
Yeah.
that you'll have the specs and.
Well, I'd be willing
So
to
if you
bet.
have local people who
Yeah.
can bid on it, right, like, and they bid lower. You still
first
got
of
your
all-
grant money and you can Doug and the state, they're about spending the money, so. Someone came in low and the project got done. As long as you can find something else for that person to do, you can keep spending that money usually.
Which would mean what? Additional trails or, I mean, how would that work?
Yeah, it'd probably be,
Use the material on adjacent trails?
yeah, maybe continuing that snowmobile trail. I wouldn't expect my cost estimate hopefully to be that far off, so.
Right.
It could be
I'm just thinking.
signage and stuff like that.
Okay.
Um,
Signage or an extension that goes to the
Stuff you can do in the
development.
parking lot
Yeah.
too. Stuff you can do.
Yeah,
Parking lots.
yeah, maybe building, taking the parking lot of Cat's property with extra material.
They're not super militant about that.
In terms of the material that you were looking at, was there anything that would be general fill that you would need to build up an area before you started getting into the like 3/4 minus gravel and stuff like that?
No, I would just excavate out and put down, the turnpiking, I would excavate out, put the stone down and then put more stone on top. And then you're gonna have to either boulder.
The fabric under it.
I don't really like fabric.
Yeah.
Every time I use fabric, it always comes out of the ground a couple years later. And so,
Bad.
I mean, how much does a snowmobile weigh?
A couple hundred pounds.
Yeah, I mean,
300.
Fabric is really so you're not like pressing everything into the ground.
Right.
And losing it. And like if you're walking on it and riding bikes on it, generally you can't press it into the ground. So we don't really use fabric when it's a hiking and biking trail. Maybe on the snowmobile section, yeah, we could call out fabric. Well, every application I've seen of
Depends on
fabric
it, yeah, yeah.
tends to just look ugly after years.
Travel.
When you say turnpike, what do you mean by that?
Can't find a picture quick enough. Turnpiking is just building the trail up. So instead of the trail, like if this was the natural ground level.
Yeah.
For most of the trail's just gonna be at that ground level. You would excavate out the ground and then you'd put the stone in. And it would come to the level that the ground around it is. Turnpiking, it's gonna be 8 or 9 inches above the ground.
Where do we have standing water?
Yeah.
Where there's always
Basically,
wet.
get
And
some
then
elevated.
you'll need culverts and drainage.
Get some
Because the
elevation.
water's got a pond behind the trail, uphill of the trail. We're gonna have to get it under or.
Somewhere, yeah.
Under or over the trail.
If you came in over, like we were talking about, and there was money left over, could it be used for like continual maintenance then? Or is
Probably
it,
not.
it's a one-time?
It's implementation.
Yeah.
Again, I wouldn't expect it to be terribly under. If it was, I mean, you guys.
What would you see as maintenance required for the trail you're proposing? Like,
Yeah, so an all-persons trail is gonna require a lot of the general maintenance trails require like corridor cutting, like keeping stuff trimmed back, cutting the down trees off. Because it's a very robust, like a highly developed trail, should require a lot less tread maintenance and like a lot less drainage maintenance than say other typical, like a hiking trail. Where you're gonna have to go out and keep the drains clear. You'll have to keep the culverts clear. That'll be the biggest drainage
right,
maintenance.
but there's not a lot of flowing water where we're looking. There's a lot of standing water where
Yeah.
we're looking, so they shouldn't get clogged with much.
No, but you'd wanna go out like, you know, in the spring and in the fall typically and make sure they're clean. We can certainly
I assume
include
it's
some of
like
the
that.
best management.
Sounds like my outdoor ed class job. Yeah.
Dave Carroll.
Yeah, carrying too, yeah, it's true.
So this is for an all persons trail. All whatever. Is
Yeah.
there a level down that would cost less? Or,
Yeah.
I mean, because we want it to be able to be used. But
Are we rolling on it? Right, like, do you need to be a wheelchair or a walker?
so
or
how would that affect the cost if we made it
Side by
something different?
side?
It's still gonna take a lot of work to
Mhm.
make it dry and
Right.
usable. But it would bring the cost down pretty significantly. I mean, these are like over $20 a linear foot average trails. I wanna say you could get that in half, but you could get that down a lot if the trail was narrower and we didn't have to, if it could be a dirt surface in places. If you didn't mind if there were roots exposed, that sort of stuff. It would bring it down pretty significantly.
But
Does that impact the grant though?
You can still go after a grant for that.
Okay.
But it doesn't have to be an accessible trail.
Okay.
I mean, one of the questions on the application is, how do you address accessibility? That doesn't mean it needs to be.
I thought that sort of, I
accessible.
thought having it accessible sort of raises, gets us some points.
Yeah, it could, yeah.
Were you saying that like if accessible trails have to connect to accessible trails, like we couldn't have one stretch of this, there's kind of split into 3 essentially sections.
You could do like, I don't know. I
Something
have to
for
think about
everyone.
that.
So like in Winthrop, what they have is, the main trail loop is accessible.
I'm not sure if it is.
You don't think so?
I mean, it is a nice hard surface all the way
Yeah, it might be a
around.
surface trail. It
But
might not be universally
There are some
accessible.
pitches that you could not, if you were on your own on a wheelchair, you would not be able to take that.
Yeah, so it could just be a surfaced trail.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and not.
But, so maybe they don't bill it as accessible. But it's sort of, they have like a branch off.
But that is certainly more accessible than like a very rooty trail.
Right.
So that's
Right.
something like in your application, you can talk about, hey, we're still, if you
Well, see,
were.
that's the thing. I would like it to
Trail
be
run.
something that's easy for most people to use. A 65, a 75-year-old person, to who feels comfortable walking should be able to walk on it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's accessible. Maybe it doesn't meet all the requirements. So I'm just, as we go through this, is the town going to balk and say, this is too much money? We don't even want to ask for that much money for a grant. So
Why would the?
do we have to, we have to submit this request.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not coming out of the town. The only
It's
thing
coming out of the
that's,
select.
the only thing that's coming out of the town's pocket for this would be 10%. So,
Yeah, sure. But
so I mean, at 220, 230, talking about 22,000.
yeah, I guess you can say, why wouldn't the town go along with it? Because it's not our money. But that's, it's all our money. It's all the state's money. And where do we want to spend it?
Right.
Do we feel like this is the best use for it?
Well, I think that's the question. If we think we're actually getting a benefit, then I think it's worth doing. If it's really not, if it's just sort of getting a label, then I'd say it's not worth it. But if it's actually gonna provide benefit and provide a place where more people could go, because I mean, this is probably the only one that would sort of really be, out of the town, what we're looking at, a real accessible trail.
Yeah, it's kind of like our selling point.
Yeah, I mean,
Our model home.
it would be the one place where somebody who really has,
Yeah.
and this is where it gets to the question we're talking, how much of a difference does it make in terms of like getting people who have some limited mobility? Can this really going to that universal access, can it really get them out there as opposed to just sort of doing, say, maybe like what Winthrop was doing, like a hard pack, but not meeting all, maybe the bells and whistles. Yeah.
Does it cut down on long-term maintenance to go for something more like this with the gravel? That's, versus, or is it gonna be?
It would be less maintenance. I mean, even almost any trail, you're gonna probably need to bring in some aggregate for this terrain because it is so flat and so wet.
Even if we didn't do.
And the soils aren't really great. Even if you were building just like a mountain biking, more primitive trail, you're probably gonna need to do bridges and boardwalks and ditching and turnpiking and all of these things on a smaller scale. But it's still gonna be more expensive than the average trail and not a very flat, wet place. But it would be less than an all-person's trail for sure. I mean, I can run some other costs and show you some options. You can think about, it's like the field loop, since that's the shorter one, and I think it's easier. It's like there's less design constraints on that loop. Is that the all persons universally accessible, and then where we're sharing the snowmobile trail and where we're in the old orchard or below, all that stuff, is that more primitive? That could be a thought for sure.
What's our, I mean, we have to look at the surveys, I guess, but, as far as like,
That's one question I
Providing-
would ask. Yeah, what do
Yeah.
people want?
right, like, do people want to be able to drive their side by sides or golf carts, and would this trail cover that? Or not really, because it's not wide enough, like, is this trail, it's not designed for that, it is just a walking trail,
Yeah,
This is
except for where it's a snowmobile trail.
except for where it's a snowmobile.
Right.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, do you have a population that really wants that accessible? I mean, universally accessible trails are pretty hot right now for sure. Like lots of people are thinking about them and doing them for obvious
Young
reasons.
families would want them too.
Yeah. And a great way to, but accessibility is most certainly a spectrum. And so, universally accessible, right? Sidewalks, like that type of stuff. The built environment where ADA reigns is like highly accessible. And then the Knife's Edge on Katahdin is a trail that is very inaccessible. And so there's a huge, there's so many things in between there. So you can still provide accessibility, but maybe it's not to that full you know, ABA standard.
So for the ABA standard, sort of, what is that sort of designed in mind for, in terms of like,
It is
Mobility.
essentially ADA for, well, it's ADA for the outdoor spaces, for campgrounds, beaches, so all the federal land management agencies have to abide by that.
so conceivably a wheelchair could use that?
Doesn't necessarily mean that, because there's a lot of,
I would think it would, you couldn't use a wheelchair.
yeah, there's a lot of those exemptions, so like,
Right.
you go to the national forest and it's like, hey, this would, one of the exemptions, I think, is by doing this, we would take away from the intent and the character of that trail. So if,
Right.
you know, if your intent is to have a 2 foot wide, narrow, primitive feeling, I'm in touch with nature on a rugged hiking trail, yeah, making that accessible would take away from that experience. And so I think you have some options. This is like the high end, right?
Right,
But
right.
I can put together some costs, but it would certainly reduce the cost. I think one thing I always like to think about is your phasing, right? Like you could do this, but before we had the bond pass, my recommendation was gonna be just do the field loop, because that's closer to 50,000. That's the smaller ask of RTP, and they only do 120. And so you're like, you gotta be really hopeful that you can get the big one. And if you don't, you get nothing. Where if you ask for 50, sometimes they'll be like, hey, we'll give you 45. Can you use it? Which you should always say, yeah, we'll use it. So, you know, you can think about phasing this too, right? Like maybe you just go after the field loop and ask the town to go after that, and you do that first, and you see what the town's excitement to that and the community's excitement to that is. It's really easy to develop things more, right? Like it's easier to chop the trees down and put a parking lot up than this parking lot away. So it's like way easier to start with something that's a little more primitive and not as built up, and build it up more over time.
But sorry, just to clarify, the field loop is not plowed in the winter. Is that what we just?
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
Can't park down there.
So you want to be
So
able
that
to.
kind of takes that out of consideration in terms of
Yeah.
the, what our two, what our main.
Snowshoeing it or anything like that.
Well,
you can use it, you just
their
can't
priority is
park down
available
there.
parking
I see.
year, well, maybe not year round, maybe they don't
Yeah.
care. But yeah. So,
The town's priority?
our understanding, talking to Doug, was
It's a grant.
trails that you're building really need dedicated parking, not dedicated, but available parking.
Yeah, I wouldn't,
The,
they don't necessarily need to be available year round, I don't think.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think you could still argue that after hours, could they park in that other lot where?
You can park
Dude,
anywhere,
they're
yeah.
dangerous.
I mean, even during
Like,
hours, you
get
can
up the
park
hill.
anywhere. It's just a matter of whether you can find a spot.
Yeah.
That's the only
And then walk
question.
down the hill.
Yeah.
I
Definitely snowshoe down the hill.
I will not
Ski down the
speak
hill.
for Doug, but I think that the parking you have available would not limit your application.
Okay.
As long as the RSU is
Yeah,
happy.
I think that's,
Yeah, as long as you can get a
We have to
letter
have-
from the RSU saying like, we support this project.
yeah, we have to have further conversation with them
Yeah.
about the park.
I don't, you know, their goal is certainly to make sure you have a sustainable trail, one that meets the community's goals, you know, one that isn't impacting the environment negatively. And like the trail management, like they want to make sure it's gonna work, but like, you know, the specifics of when the school might want to allow public parking or how that might work, like I don't think the state's not gonna get too invested in that per se.
There's a spot to park up by the baseball field in that, the middle school baseball field, just off-road parking, because people pull in there to watch games. So those can just be, you can just pull off the road right there and go down the trail that dumps out onto the road up by the baseball field too, and totally avoid the parking lot and the school for that matter.
The thing is, I mean, if we were to park here and we were looking at room trails or whatever for skiing or something. I don't know if the opening is still in the gate right here behind
It
the
is.
building, but maybe we could take that post if it's in the middle of that opening and have this parking, and that's how you access the trail. Snowmobile trail goes right through the field and the gate's open down there. in the winter too, so might be a quick way to access along the bottom side of the parking lot, along
Oh, I know where you're at. Yeah, I get you. Yep.
down to the athletic fields.
Right.
Other questions about the RSU? You wanna talk about the tree farm?
Yeah.
And then we can talk about maybe some of the high level stuff too. All right, findings. This place also has some wet areas. What did you guess?
Where is the tree farm?
Frederickson's Tree Farm. It's
This.
Prescott Hill Road. Yeah, this
Oh.
road right here is Prescott Hill Road. I don't know the name of it.
Well, maybe it turns into Calvin at some point there.
Yeah, like downtown's like right here.
Mhm.
This section of the ski trails gets a little steep, especially for beginners. This so thinking about access, right? Like people parking here as a trailhead.
Okay, I see where.
This green thing that I just had pop up. Very appealing terrain for beginners, like people. Yeah, it is very mellow terrain. The soils look great. It's all upland. There's beautiful slopes. So one thing that this goes back to like this discussion of accessibility, right? Like one thing that I'm always looking for in communities, and communities are always asking for is more beginner, more easier trails. Not that everyone's looking for university accessible, but like just easier trails, because a lot of the trails we have in Maine are rocky and rooty and steep and yada, yada, yada. So beautiful little high point here with some really nice slope down below it. I guess that's all the big findings there. So you're looking at I'll get my notes with this one. You're looking at a couple of zones here. So when we look at larger properties, like the RSU was a very specific, and so we were like diving into design. As we look at these larger properties, we tend to break things into conceptual zones and think about those based on terrain patterns, like landscape patterns, and experience goals. So this is more like trail system planning and thinking about what could be here. On top of when we did the walkthrough, there's lots of improvements to the cross-country ski trails. So same thing that we just saw, right? Like, let's add culverts, let's do some of this work. So some of those sort of prescriptions will be in the plan, but also this larger opportunity that this site could present. As you'll see at the end, when I get to like next steps, one of the big next steps is talking to your private property owners about what they actually want to play host to. But that green sliver under our logo, beautiful place for like very beginner trails. You know, you can start getting into some more intermediate trails as you climb up the hill a bit here. Beautiful place for like intermediate and maybe the more bike optimized stuff, because you've got some nice slopes. That's where you can start playing with, you know, directionality and having bike only downhills that mountain bikers would really enjoy, because you've got some elevation and stuff there. And then you've got this beautiful zone out here that I tend to call like a side country type of experience, where it's not quite the back country, it's not super remote, but that's where you start feeling like, oh yeah, I'm away from like houses and roads and the built environment, and I'm out in the woods doing something. And so some quick sketches of like, oh, what trail, you know, this is an exercise, not necessarily, and this is where the trail should go. This is much more of an exercise in like, okay, what could those zones support basically in terms of trails? And overall, you're looking at like 5 to 10 miles of trail potential, single track trail potential, in addition to the cross-country ski trails that are out there. I also show these cyans I think there's two really approachable, feasible reroutes that could be done to the cross-country ski trails in those steep sections to add either. The recommendation would be just cut a reroute and leave the steeper section for people who want to ski the steeper section up or down, but have a reroute, sign it as the easier way down, and just have
Hear what you just said. He said more grooming, Chris.
Only a couple hundred feet here.
Yeah.
So,
Turn around.
yeah, I don't know. We can also pull up the maps and talk about this more, but really, really cool opportunity on this property. Lots of nice upland, nice slopes, nice soils. I mean, there's wet areas for sure, but with that cross-country ski, like double track backbone, it'd be pretty feasible, I think, to add some single track in there.
What's the quote for cost for those types of trails? Would it probably, I'm assuming it'll be a little bit more primitive and kind of like.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I would still, well, the recommendation for the level of development for these trails would be more based on what the private property owner is willing to allow. If they maybe only want to allow, sort of handshake year to year type access, I would say, yeah, go primitive, do rake and ride trails. That way you don't feel bad when they go away and you don't feel like you put a lot into them. The terrain could certainly support those more developed type trails, like bringing a mini excavator and literally.
Yeah, get some toys out there.
Building.
Berms, drops,
Yeah.
jumps, drops. Where's my root set?
Yeah, or just even building a stable trail bed, like out of mineral soil. That's not just the rake and ride, so.
Right.
Those opportunities exist. I would. Caution
General,
you.
general price ranges for. those.
Yeah, so those like a very primitive rake and ride trail. I mean, the most primitive trail you could get away with, right, for very cheap with volunteers doing it for like dollars on the foot. Generally though, like you'd still want to build drainage, you'd still want to do work on a trail. And so anything, like it's hard to find trails under $5 a foot nowadays. Like I'm thinking of Central Maine NEMBA is I don't know who's familiar with Central Maine NEMBA. I know some people are. So NEMBA, New England Mountain Bike Association, they're a New England wide nonprofit. Central Maine NEMBA is based in this area and they're one of the most active chapters. And Chris Riley is really awesome. He's their chapter president. They actually hire young people every year to do trail work. And so I'm thinking of like these high school, college kids, right? Like what are they gonna cost? At the lowest level, and that's like in your 5, 6, those types of price ranges per foot. When you start bringing in the mini excavator and you start building the trail, now it's probably more in the 8, 9, 10, maybe $11, $12. So these trails are much more in the, $5 to $10, $6 to $12 a foot type range. So, $30,000 to $60,000 a mile, not $100,000 a mile.
That can be a grant to chase some other day.
There's the Maine Mountain Bike Fund. There are other opportunities, the Maine Mountain Bike Fund,
Write that down.
Maine Mountain Bike Trail Fund, MFBTF. If you Google it, you'll find a very nondescript.
Who the property owners involved in?
Yeah, I did.
There's two.
So Tom Oji
This one.
owns the lower land.
Yeah,
And then Peter Bouchard owns the upper land.
I got you.
It's
And then
Sanborn
the
Oval.
fields on the left are owned by Chris Sanborn.
Good.
So that green area is wooded area in there. And
Yeah,
they're
that's a
interesting.
wetland.
It is wet. Yeah.
The state calls wetlands.
Yeah.
The Maine Mountain Bike Trail Fund. Typically, it's very easy ask, rolling application, not a hard application. They typically send you a check. If you get the grant, you'll just get a check in the mail, not a ton of reporting. It's private money, so like the red tape is much less. Typically, very fond of funding projects under $50,000. Anything over 50, I think I've only heard of one time that someone asked and got that. Because again, it's like you won't find it on the website. There's not a hard and fast rule, but basically Chris Riley is involved with that fund. And so,
That's how you talk to, right?
Yeah.
but that like they've used that kind of money. Chris is also, when I get to the next steps, one suggestion is to reach out to Central Maine NEMBA because they're very active in this area. Chris has his finger on the pulse for a lot of like the single track more mountain bike. They still do shared use, like hike bike. A lot of the trails they're doing are shared use, but they're working with land trust and he's been able to cobble together various funding. So, you know, my inclination is if you had some good permission, Central Maine Member might be willing. You know, I'm not gonna speak for them, but like they might be willing to come over and really start lending a hand on, okay, yeah, let's help you maybe find some money and let's bring some capacity to a project like this.
What's good permission look like?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I saw Chris after I did the site visit here and I mentioned, hey, I might be talking, you know, let's talk about Monmouth. And he was very excited. He was like, yeah, that's like a sort of a black hole for us. We haven't done anything over there. So I think good permission, you know, for rake and ride stuff could be a handshake, could
Yeah.
be, you know, maybe they'd be, again, I can't speak for him, but he'd be a great guy to tap. Like if you had permission for a handshake, hey, and they're like, yeah, go crazy, go nuts, build some rake and ride trail. I'd say, see if you could get Chris to come out and do like a tutorial
That'd be cool.
with folks who
Well,
want
it sounds
to,
like
with
he's
volunteers who
kind
want
of
to do that.
That approach, so I could reach out.
How long have we had permission here?
Several years.
Yeah.
Going
Yeah,
into the fourth year, I think.
probably.
It started with
4 years.
Canmore and then it went up to OG.
Yeah,
OG's parking area that he's given us this year for the tree farm and for the sign, he keeps saying that he's talking about selling it. You know, he doesn't like, he doesn't want to commit too far, 'cause he doesn't know like if he's gonna keep it.
That whole property,
yeah,
The upper one, right?
this
Yeah,
one.
yeah, that one.
yeah.
So one, you know, if a landowner is potentially interested in selling and there's a community interest in protecting that land, one source to maybe make that happen is the Trust for Public Land. They do a lot of community forest work. I've worked with them on the Rumford Community Forest. We're trying to acquire land in Millinocket for a Millinocket community forest. But TPL often will, you know, if it's a project that they'll take on, they'll help raise the money. I mean, they don't own the land. That either goes to a town or it goes to a nonprofit or but some of that funding, like again, community forest is like now sort of a technical term, and some of that funding comes from USDA Forest Service. So there is a process, like I was a part of the Rumford Community Forest planning process. They had to have like an actual town process, but y'all are set up really well here and doing good work. So I mean, this committee could potentially like
So
do
if
some of
there's
it.
trails on it, and if they're getting used all year round, biking, skiing, snowshoeing, hiking, then that would have potential for that community forest.
Yeah, I mean,
situation.
the thing with any conservation acquisition is, they're bound by, the appraisal. So like, you'd have to have a landowner who's willing, like if that land was super valuable and they could get a lot more money for it, TPL is not gonna be able to pay more for it. They just can't because of the grants and stuff they get. So that's something to think about, but it doesn't even, you don't even need to necessarily have a ton of use. Like the Rumford Community Forest was just a piece of property that a family, you know, wanted to see conserved. Sometimes the community forests have a big working forest element where it's literally like, here's the town woodlot, you can come, you know, where we're doing active forestry, but nowadays they have a very strong recreation. I think you might have a good, you know, one big thing here is you don't have a lot of publicly accessible or like there's no land trust conserving land. So, you know, I think you could have a good argument from why we need to conserve land.
A good idea to proactively try to go that direction before the trail went in, like buy the land, put on the trail?
That would be, you know, then you could certainly go after money and build. I wouldn't,
Or should we make the relationship where we already have the relationship with this?
I would, yeah, I tend to lean on like the locals who know the people best, and like what you feel like, how much, you know, what you feel like they would be willing to
I feel
do.
it would be weight on him.
Yeah. I think probably like some light break and ride type stuff to start, maybe some volunteer, like let's build like a little beginner loop over here, a mile, a single track type thing. And like really get people jazzed up on this. I think it could also be a good way for this group to like start activating some of the community, like let's host some volunteer days out there and do some trail work.
Steve, how many, I'm just trying to compare that, what the KLT was, so how many acres is that, you know, what that is in terms of acres?
I have this here. Those, the zones, so sort of like that upland, right? Like all the stuff that's shaded, not this, that's wetlands, but these shaded areas. That's 11 acres. This pink is 25. That's about 25 acres, and that's about 100 acres. So 160.
So it's pretty, it's.
Then that's not including, you know, where it's kind of wet, and you would use, you know, you'd use these trails for connectivity and these cross-country ski trails. I know it's good. I mean, like, I don't know how, I've got more if you guys want to keep talking. I'm happy
You
to
have
like,
the overlay of where the snowmobile trail kind of goes up through that at all?
yes, and so I realized, when I printed these maps to PDF that the snowmobile trail comes down
Yeah.
here, right,
Yeah.
goes up there. Well, I'll pull up in the big map here in a sec, and I can definitely show everything. This is, literally, I have 2 slides left, and then we can talk about a map if you want, but this was looking at like high level connectivity. Yeah. So essentially, right, we want all these places to connect. We want the schools to connect into downtown. We want downtown, you know, to connect over toward these trails. We want these trails to connect back. And so some places to think about that just purely based on like, wow, this is a big open lot. Again, I'm totally not telling you to go build trails on people's property. I'm merely saying you should start talking to your neighbors about this stuff. But from the fairgrounds down, I know there's some snowmobile trails through here. I think that makes a lot of sense. Here, you can see those orange arrows popped up maybe. For how do we get to this road? Not sure the name of that road. Blue, that's an easy one. Get over to Blue Road, and then get over to downtown. On the, of course, the railroad tracks are here, so that's the tough thing is like railroad companies are notoriously very difficult to do. But if there was a way, what's this road out of town?
There is snowmobile trails over by the transfer station. I know it'd be, I mean, you'd be on a stretch of road for like a little exposed, not in the woods at all, but there is a opportunity to go down, what would that be?
That's
That
Berry.
Berry Road?
Yeah.
To get
Yeah.
to where you can connect into the woods and walk over on the land where we were at with the.
Yeah. Yeah, so Barry, there's stuff right along the railroad tracks. And a couple of those properties touch whatever that road is. And then there's the transfer station, which makes a lot of sense for connecting
Mhm.
over. And so I'll open the big map. It'll be a lot easier when I open the big map. But like also need to think about on-road connectivity here. Last slide, you know, I think the field loop made a lot of sense. We can talk about this more. I think it makes sense initially as a first phase. Really talk to the private landowners. Talk to all your private landowners. So, that is like, again, you don't have a lot of public land here. So, you know, but if you have some secure permission, I think approaching Central Maine is a really great thing to do. Let me. Boom. All right. Let me turn off this. Let me turn off that. Where do folks want to look? Does everyone want to look at some stuff in particular? I tired you all out. I'm trying. We were just talking about that connectivity and those properties. Let's see if it's
The grand
Display that
plan.
here.
Let's talk about the grand
Oh.
plan.
For some reason, it's not.
Yeah, I thought it was. I'm over here like, dude, no wonder you guys were.
He's frozen.
No, it's because I only
You turn something off.
stop share that, share this other.
Oh, you were sharing a tab on
Yeah,
the screen.
I wasn't sharing my screen. There we go. There we go. So yeah, I have since sketched in more snowmobile trails. Since I was like, shit, I never finished doing that, but, so that's what all those cyan dash lines are. But yeah, here's the fairgrounds. Here's a undeveloped parcel with frontage right here on Blue Road. And then there's this undeveloped parcel, looks like, with frontage right there. Not very far down to Main Street. Of course, this, I can erase this section, I guess, now. You know, I think it's gonna be really hard to have pure trail connect. It's always very hard to have pure trail connectivity across the community. And so I think you are gonna have to think about your on-road. You know, how do we utilize the sidewalk we have now, and how do we expand things like that? But yeah, I think, you know, if people are connected to the fairgrounds and the school, I think the easiest thing for the time being is gonna be they have a sidewalk that can get them downtown. You know, if you can get over to Blue Street, you know, and over, there's another, like, there's some loop opportunities. This is Berry Street.
Berry Road.
Berry Road, yeah, so if you can get down Berry, you can see how much sort of on, you know,
Graph.
all those properties, they've got some nice back 40 type land, you know, and then in particular, this one, you know, has an access onto the road there.
So where's Cumsted, on there?
That little dotted green line.
Wait,
On
oh,
the
sorry,
left-hand side, I think.
yep, that's Compton right there.
That's Compton's loop.
So that's the loop.
Yeah, and well, that is the property. If I were to turn on. There, that is essentially like their all persons trail that they're working on.
Oh, you're on Edgery right now.
Yes.
I recognize those tabs on the left-hand side, okay.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'll be honest, looking at that railroad track, it is a pretty deep little trench there.
Yeah,
And
drops.
feasibly, I think putting like some sort of bridge over it would be doable, like literally, you could build a bridge that would go over. Would the railroad let you? That's a whole other sport.
Easy to say no.
My dad was a division engineer,
30 feet
Norfolk Southern Railroad, so I could ask him.
Yeah, I mean, that's.
Happy to do that.
It might be a very
Under the
expensive
railroad,
bridge
you might have
and
to buy-
would probably far exceed the cost of like even just, you know, sidewalking or improving someone's road. essentially. But I do think that transfer station is really, you know, if you think about this right now as being
Parking spot.
where you could have a trail system
Yeah, that's where the ruckus will
in
be.
your community, like your typical natural surface, hiking, biking, skiing, snowshoeing. type
Kingdom
trail
Trails
system.
Part 2.
Yeah,
on
you
the
know.
main.
That's where it could be, and I think most people would likely drive to a trailhead but you do have a really interesting opportunity for connectivity through the transfer station to get people close to town. And then
Yeah, because
here's that snowmobile trail too. And it comes down and over. And then I think one comes.
And the blue is
Yeah.
a ski trail.
I haven't touched them all, but.
The extra
That's cool.
crossing there.
And with the transfer station, there would be some pretty easy parking area.
Yeah.
That old bridge
Yeah.
road.
Here is that property, 1063. I think it makes a lot of sense to think about, yeah, continuing, you know, creating accessible connectivity here. If that's gonna be a 55 and over community, you know, if they could get down to the school and use those trails. And then this snowmobile trail, like knowing more about these landowners and this trail, because
Pretty much one landowner out there.
that could provide some
really?
cool.
Wow.
do we need to be careful when we're talking about that 1063 property, if we're doing like a loop or something around there, if it's all accessible, then and for that to connect to the school, we'd have to have that connectivity be all accessible too, right?
Yeah,
From
which,
the-
you know, I think you would probably want.
Yeah.
If you have an accessible loop,
You could dump out on his sidewalk.
But yeah, that would start to
There's
add
no-
cost.
Yeah, it's too
You know,
bad.
you could potentially say it's the snowmobile trail and that's why we haven't
Oh,
approved it
yeah.
too.
Okay.
Oh, we didn't really talk about Cat's property too much, but there's not a lot of upland over there. So there's like, there's opportunity for maybe a couple trails,
Yeah.
which could be interesting. But it gets like wet as soon as you get down.
Yeah.
And then the new properties we talked about are these two, right? It's hard to, let me turn off.
What's that Homestead?
These two, correct?
Mhm.
And the house is on that lot.
Mhm.
So, yeah, my very first, what I would do is the state says there's a wetland right there, so.
Where's the wetland?
That big
That
green,
green spot.
that big green spot. If I turn on my contours and let me hold on. That is what soil data lists as hydric soils. So hydric soils hold water, not typically where we want to build trails. They usually match up very well with wetlands. Yeah. Clay.
Glacial clay, blue clay, is that what it is?
Yeah. I'd have to see what the actual. And then, the contours kind of like confirm all of that where they show.
Yeah, it all
very
just slopes
flat.
down into that.
But you have this beautiful looking hillside over here. And it looks like you can sneak around that property, stay above all the wet. You can see the wetland. That's probably not wetland. That's probably slope, but
Yeah.
and then get on this hillside. And so, yeah, there's probably some opportunity on those properties for more of the sort of natural surface, hike, bike, typical shared use type trails.
Connecting into town would be.
And I can, I didn't have a chance to do it before the meeting, but I'll kind of do the zone analysis and do some of that desktop analysis for like, okay, how many miles of trail might you fit? What might that look like for a cost to build that? So that can go in the other report that talks about the opportunities across the town for these other things.
So that whole piece is what they're looking at, right? There was a piece paralleling Norris Hill. I wasn't sure.
I think it was like.
Yeah, is that part of it?
These two properties.
Okay, so those two parallel properties aren't part of it.
These two, I'd have to go back and look at the.
Okay, I was trying to interpret, okay,
I think it's just on
on Packard Road.
the Cressy Road. Cressy Road.
Packard Road.
Packard.
Right, you had said Cressy, I think, so I was looking and I was like, I think that's Packard.
It's Packard.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you said Cressy.
I did Cressy, but I think it's Packard.
That's
Cressy goes from 202 to Main Street.
Yeah.
The connectivity on those would probably be tough.
Gotta put a sidewalk.
Yeah.
Gotta put a sidewalk on Norris Hill.
So one thing to think about with those similar to the tree farm is like, where can we park people? Where can we have a trail for, 5 to 10 cars type thing? Not like you need a 50-car parking lot, but you also probably don't want 2 cars. Cause then it'll get full, and the people will get mad.
Right.
Lots to keep this community busy for years.
Yeah.
Lots of great opportunities, I think, high level, a little wet back there. So I think I can run some more costs. I think would be helpful for me as you guys, think about that survey and maybe think about what you really want out there. And, I can write the documents so you have options and that would still support, you could still attach it. You could pull everything from it to fill in the application. You could attach it. And I think it would still show the state, like even if you didn't go with, say, the All Persons Trail, that would still be fine. And then, obviously I'll probably wait to hear a little bit from you guys before I start diving in hard on that deliverable. There's work I can do. Like there's always, talking about the process and all the background sort of stuff that goes into the deliverable and getting it set up. And then I'll definitely start working on the town-wide deliverable. Sounds like there's not a lot of, and that's
Grand
where.
plan would be important.
Hmm?
Grand plan, I think, would be important.
Yeah,
Even-
that's-
Even in the the application for the hub here.
Yeah, showing that, hey, we have this sort of
And this is. what we'd like to see
town-wide
happen, yeah.
feasibility study, that sort of concept plan. And that's where there'll be a variety of maps, but one map or a series, a couple maps could show like 1063. So that could support going to the town and or going to the developers and talking about that. And then so the one constraint for that literal project is it's wet, and then the other big constraint is like, you don't have any open space. So I think, yeah, talking to your neighbors, like, you've already sent me new properties since the last time I visited, so continue talking to neighbors and seeing where you can get permission to do this stuff. I think is gonna be really important, but y'all are doing a good job of that so far. Any questions for me?
No, that was the question I had, just in terms of sort of when it might make sense for you to sort of finalize things. I think it sounds like what you're saying, maybe get some more feedback from us, so. Then we have
Specifically for
that, so we have a better.
because that's what you want more
Yeah,
detail
so
on
I
to
think-
go after the
So,
application.
so we could more attach, so it could be attached.
So I'll get working on the deliverables and, I'll send drafts over and we can talk about, if you want me to zoom in or come out, or if it's just, hey, here's an email with a redlined copy of your draft, please make these edits, that type of thing. Whatever, I try to be flexible and make sure we get you where you need, so, but yeah, look for some drafts from me, I'll look to hear back from you on some thoughts on the details.
What deadline are we looking at for applying?
So the application deadline is June,
Yeah,
so I mean.
We'll get some time to figure.
so it's,
We have,
deadline's June, you should be asking for letters from your state agencies a couple months in advance.
that's what we have to work on next.
But yeah, you'll have everything from me. At this point, it might be the early part of 2025, but like, it'll be well in advance, I think, of you going after.
Letters from state agencies.
You have to get like clearance
Yeah.
from like
DEP, SHPO, and
historical, I think, like archaeological.
inland fisheries and wildlife.
Okay.
Basically, they're gonna do a very high level, are there endangered species? Is there anything historical out there? Is there wetlands? And so they might see these wetlands, but then that's where in my report and your answers to all the questions, you'll basically say, yeah, we know it's wet. Here's how we're gonna deal with that.
Okay.
Good.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah.
What kind of approval or would we need to get from abutting landowners to do this kind of stuff? Will the neighbors on Main Street think, well, you're gonna add more water onto our property when you throw these culverts in certain areas, or do we need to get approval?
You don't need approval. So trails we've discussed so far, we haven't really gone above what is exempt from the stormwater regulations at the state level. So I can do a quick look. If you have any code in town specific code around stormwater regulations or land disturbance,
I think so.
that would be the only thing.
I think there might be a setback provision, like 6 feet from the property boundary for structures.
Yeah.
But these aren't
Yeah,
structures.
these aren't structures. So, the stormwater regs for the state, if we did trigger stormwater regs, you would probably need to hire an engineer, and that's where that stuff would come in. But I don't think we trigger
Right, because
stormwater regs.
we're not moving water, we're just moving above water in the places where we're
Right,
putting
you're
in
not trying to
culverts, right?
divert
It's not flushing anywhere, it's just sitting directly underneath, right?
Yeah,
The history there, though, is when the new school got built, people on Main Street have had water in their basement.
I could see
But
that.
since the new school's gotten built, there's been 3 very heavy years of rain.
Right,
So-
yeah,
So
last
there's
year.
not even, right, not even data. No, it's a long distance between here and Main Street. Hard to say.
Well, I know when I was talking to the civil engineers when they were building the middle school and walking back there and they had to, their plans had to conform to certain standards for all that. And he said, if you're building trails back here, like if he were the one building trails back there, he would need to get all this approval for stuff. But,
Oh, interesting.
you know, at this point, now that that project is done, we do something. Hopefully, we don't have to go through the same steps that he would have had to have gone through at that time.
There's a lot of space for retention ponds that are in there, and those ponds don't have water in them.
Yeah.
There's like standing water in one. Since the last, full year that I've been going back there, I haven't seen any, even during the heavy times, so. Rest were
That's
empty.
because they don't work.
Well, there's that part.
You should
Yeah.
talk to him some
There's that
more.
part.
Blame him.
They're not overflowing.
I don't see, I don't think we'll need to do a lot of permitting unless you have town level permitting. But as long as we keep the trail narrow enough, then it doesn't trigger those stormwater regs that would require a lot of that work. And we also, there's no other DEP permits I can tell of because we're not crossing any streams or anything. But even those are very simple permits to come by.
It was DEP, DEP, IFNW.
And is it SHPO in this state historic preservation?
Very good.
I think Doug just told me that SHPO finally will accept an email. I'm the only one out of three.
That's there's
a sign. You had to send a heart.
So we would wait for your preliminary design.
Yep.
Settle on exactly the scope that we want to apply for, and then start making the requests to the various.
Yeah, and what
State departments.
they're gonna ask for, SHPO probably still wants to see it on a USGS background, which in Esri takes half a second for me to throw that on. I don't know why. It's absolutely useless considering we have better data nowadays, but they like to see the classic like USGS quad background, so I'll print out send you a PDF of that,
Old school.
so you can send it to them.
They're all about
And
history.
they also, I love to get the shape files. So I can provide, I don't know if anyone has GIS capabilities, or GIS at home, but I can provide the shape file. I mean, you can just attach that file when you send an email to them type thing. But yeah, generally, Doug would tell you to send your letters 3 months before
Before the
the
deadline.
application.
Okay.
Yeah, because ideally, you have your letter in hand from the state agency that says you're clear.
As part of the
Yeah.
application.
That's part of the
Makes it
application.
easier for them to say yes.
Exactly.
So.
They
we're looking-
have had, people who wait and they'll still give you, like, he's given out RTP grants when you don't have your letter.
Contingent.
Contingent on it. Makes it a lot easier for them. And I think you're doing very good on time. We're talking about this in November. You're gonna have all this stuff this winter. You should have plenty of time to start applying, asking for letters.
One thing that might be helpful to get to us sort of sooner, a sooner timeframe, it'd be something that might be sort of like a rough schematic, sort of like what you had to just go to the school with to say, here's what we're looking at. And how does this, how's your parking situation impact? And that, I think, that could sort of then influence sort of some of the decisions we might
Yeah.
have to
Right,
make.
Yeah.
because we get approval to study, we didn't get approval to build.
Yeah.
Right.
And
And
you'll have to get a letter from them as.
yeah, we'll have to get it. And the parking was definitely one of the things that
Yeah.
they were supportive of the idea. They were, they were definitely supportive of it.
Yeah. My hunch is it's not the type of trail that's gonna have 100 cars per community.
Right.
I mean, I hope it gets lots of views, but I also don't think they're gonna. It'll,
Couple people that are in the.
I think.
yeah,
Five at a time, something like that.
If there was no trailhead here, right, and I was giving you recommendations on how big to make it, I'd probably say 5 to 10 cars, maybe 15, because it's accessible and those are rare. But like, it's not like a 50 car parking lot type thing for a mile of accessible trail.
It's not as. Yeah, I mean, it's just that, your town is small, it's really gonna be drawn from town.
Yeah,
Small
it's a
town.
very community oriented trail. It's not like a destination drawing people from all over.
Right. It's a-
Yeah.
And a lot of the use is going to be summertime use.
Mhm.
And there's no problem with parking
Good
in
point.
summertime.
Plenty of space.
Yeah,
Right.
I think one, not to keep throwing things at you, but one thing as you go back to the school, I've heard people talk about how that used to be the cross-country course, is talking about like the programming and how they might activate it, like, are they gonna try to host a cross-country meet after school hours when people think, oh, now's a good time to go use the trail? Oh, the trail's closed down because that was another thought to kind of trying to keep it all on
Yeah.
school property, is then it's a lot easier for them to, they want to do something like that, if the trail ran across Cat's property, it might be like, oh, how do we close that down for a cross-country race? Versus just being an interconnected system. So, nothing to add to the discussion.
Good.
Awesome.
And it was trust for public land that you said is beneficial for if there was public property
Yeah.
or private property that somebody was potentially interested in selling.
Yeah, I mean, you've got, I don't know, who would be your local land trust would be one to look at. Sure.
Yeah.
Yep, and they've got a great relationship with that Central Maine number folks I just mentioned, so. But TPL, certainly, they do the community forest, they help for here Rumford, they've done a lot of work across New England with this community forest type model. And their whole, they just bought a bunch of the land up around Millinocket to donate to the National Monument. So they help raise, they typically raise the money and acquire the property, but they will not own it, they're not. So they need a very, either the town or it's the municipality or it's an NGO, like a nonprofit, like up in Rumford, Inland Woods and Trails owns the Bethel Community Forest, owns the Rumford Community Forest. They're the literal landowner.
We can own it. Trails committee.
Yeah, and if you, if those things come up, I'm happy to connect you with, Betsy Cook is the state director. She's probably not the one you would talk to at first. There's a couple folks under her, but I know Ann, a couple of the other folks at TPL, and so I'm happy to just send a direct email.
Look, just one other question, just in terms of sort of, I don't know if you can answer this. Getting sort of approval from Doug's program, is it more likely going small or sort of? Or, if you have a good sort of proposal out there, are they as likely to do something that's bigger if it's sort of, well?
It's hard to tell now that the trails bond passed and now the cap's been raised. Doug, when we went to the Trails Coalition get together a couple weeks ago and Doug talked a bunch about the bond, he was very clear, like he wants to spend the money. And so I think if you have a good project and a solid design, which I hope you.
Yeah. When I asked that question, he said, as long as it's feasible, like the money matches your project
Yeah.
idea. So he wants to make sure that what you're asking for is actually like not too much or too little for
Right,
what
that
you're
is,
looking.
Yeah, and a lot of the times, what he runs into is people asking for too little. That's a lot.
And he was like, no,
And
because it's
people
not
trying to
enough.
build this trail and they say, we need $10,000 because we're gonna go cut the trees, and you'd be like, nah, you need to really build a trail if you're gonna call it accessible, yada, yada. So, yeah, he was also kind of frank. The bond is set up 7.5 million a year max. He's unsure if we can even, he expects this to maybe last longer than 4 years, he said. Because not that it's gonna last 10 years, but it might last, you know, so I think if you had a good project,
Gotta get a second proposal ready.
yeah.
Because he's not seeing enough demand to satisfy.
Yeah, even RTP, they had to do an emergency round this spring because they didn't spend all the money last year.
Gotcha.
So we, yeah.
So it's good to
Go
come
big
to
or
the
go
table with
home.
a shovel ready.
Yeah. so-
Proposal that's fully documented and.
All the communities I've been working with, like this time frame, and like you see, you're setting yourselves up perfect to go after this trails bond. Like you're gonna have a solid plan, design, like be able to hand this over as soon as they open those applications. So yeah, I think you're in a very good spot. And I'll try to think of some of the other funding, but Maine Mountain Bike Fund could be an interesting one to speed up maybe the single track type stuff. And if you ever had town owned land, LWCF is really good for that as well.
All right. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, thank you.
That's great.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. It's always fun. And again, kudos, like this is one of the coolest groups I've seen. Not a lot of towns like have trails committees. And then to see like a diverse trails committee with people, you know, with different backgrounds and different interests in trails come together. I do a lot of the education, I think I told you all, and like one of the big things I'm always telling people is more partnerships, so.
Yeah.
Oh, for allies.
Yeah, you guys are doing an awesome job, so. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Was there other stuff we're gonna hit up tonight? or-
Let's go real quick.
What else we got on our agenda?
I think,
No, you're
I
fine.
think we,
We hit the most important one.
Yeah.
we covered a lot of this stuff already. I think the KLT project we talked about, yeah, I mean, he sort of covered. The RTP funds. we talked. I think, I had touched base with, I tried to get a hold of Doug, but I couldn't, but I touched base with Emily and basically, you know, she said basically by January, you know, what you were saying, that they'll have everything sort of cleared up in terms of their new application process and things like that. She said, actually, the goal is to simplify the application, so it should be easier.
He showed me a draft, it didn't look like terribly similar, but.
A little bit. I guess they're gonna try. You know, I think the biggest thing was the, you know, that it was 250 and 10% match. That's really, big thing. The survey results, I don't
Well,
know.
I want to talk about the survey results. I don't think that we've gotten any additional survey results. Leaks. So
I never had my class do it, and I can do that.
So
I still haven't had my
it
class
wasn't
do it.
publicized.
The
Yeah.
QR code wasn't working. I saw it in the town office, so I filled out a physical sheet.
I think we should try to
I think,
publicize it.
yeah.
Because I
I
think,
think they need to get some printed sheets at the library. I don't know if they ever got any there
The one that-
or the QR code.
and I don't know if they were really giving them out at the town hall when people were.
I did not see anything when I came to vote.
I think. Yeah, I voted and she didn't give me one, like I know about it.
Like,
So I think we need to publicize it more.
Yes.
So I,
besides,
yeah.
like, mom and dad, like a mom at Facebook sort of thing with a QR code, or
We should do that. We should.
It's just a link.
it'll just be like.
Yeah.
And I think if we could, maybe we could put it in our, now we have a thing on the town page, you know, we have a thing on the town website or for the
Yeah.
committee. So I think maybe if we could
Put it there. People need to look for it, though.
It's,
That's the problem.
yeah, it's buried in there. I mean, that's the thing with that website is things are sort of buried. It's like you can get everything, but it's just you gotta.
Path to it.
You never look for it.
Do you think maybe you could ask Justin to put it right on the homepage? I mean, if it's a matter of urgency that we could
Okay,
elevate it for a
Okay.
short period of time while
Yeah.
publicizing.
that'd be good if it's upfront, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's good. Yeah, I think need to try to,
How many responses have we gotten so far?
I think we have 26.
is that off?
That's
That's
not-
on
That was from
that from the voting?
Ten of those are for my kids.
Yeah.
So test driving it, we were test driving.
We didn't get anything at the election.
No, I don't think anyone saw anything at the election. I don't think there was anything.
I asked
I don't remember.
town office and I said, anybody taking these? She's like, not really.
So the paper.
Well, you gotta hand
ones,
it out.
I
You
don't
gotta,
know,
like, give it to people.
I don't know if the paper things ever were returned, so I don't know where those are.
I handed it to somebody at the town office.
They may have a
Put it in
file.
the stack.
Yours is there.
You know, it's not entirely
All
possible.
right, good thing. Yeah, and I guess also just all of us try to, I mean, publicize, among us, let people know.
I
Yeah.
have a group, Main Street group chat, I'll share it too.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, just to let your neighbors do whatever. I mean, the age friendly, I think we should let those people,
Is there a question on there about your age group?
Yeah.
There is, okay, just trying to remember. So it's okay if I have students do it?
Yeah.
If I push it
Yeah,
into
I
the
think,
school?
yeah.
Okay. I don't know if I have the link. How do I find the link? Cause I don't want to write emails.
I'll see if I can find a link and I'll send it out to
Okay.
people. Me too.
Next meeting is December 3rd. I think when we meet next time, we'll schedule our meetings out into the next year.
Okay.
One thing, so for our secretary position, when's the due date?
17th.
17th. So,
So
reasonable chance you'll be here next
I
time.
think we just need a backup more than anything.
Yeah,
That's why, I mean, I'm assuming I can attend most meetings so long as you do that.
yeah, well, you might need to
Yeah.
take a couple off.
Well,
17th anyway. I would say take the 17th off.
Don't expect anything by the third between things.
We just need a back, we need a backup,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. And if if something comes up.
Oh, good, no.
We'll do ad hoc, we'll line up. Step backwards.
Dave hasn't hit his nose yet.
Opportunities. I can't do it, right? It's a be.
No, stuff like that, yeah.
All right.
Two roles.
All right, good, and I'll get an agenda out. Maybe do it by Friday, I guess, before. Next.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Good meeting.
Good. Hey, so what's your email?